Let's go! It's the LA Football Podcast.
Touchdown Rams! Recovered by the Chargers. Touchdown UCLA!
With USC great and NFL stud, Frostee Rucker.
The Trojans back in front.
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's up, Los Angeles, and welcome back to the Believe in LA Football Podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network. Of course, we're on LAFBnetwork.com, your destination for all your favorite Los Angeles football teams. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Had some live football finally for those Ram fans out there. Had a scrimmage at SoFi. I was kind of bummed it wasn't televised. I kind of thought with everything going on that would be something they'd televise. I mean, they usually allow, if it was a normal circumstance, there would have been fans at the scrimmage. So it's not like they're like hiding anything. So I'm kind of bummed they didn't televise it. But anyway, we got you covered because we're having the great Kirk Morrison on the show. He's been at Rams camp throughout the offseason. He was at the scrimmage at SoFi on Saturday, so he gives us an inside look into what he saw, some battles that he's been witnessing. I know me and Frostee have talked about a bunch of them that we are looking for, but because he is at camp, he gives that inside access. So Kirk Morrison, if you don't know him, he's on ESPN. He does college football. He's the ESPN LA host. He does pregame and postgame for your Los Angeles Rams. So a great guy. He's an NFL veteran, 8 years. Him and Frostee go back. So as always, my co-host of the show, Frostee Rucker, will be joining me for this interview. Thank you all for tuning in. Looking forward to that. But before we get going with that, got to tell you about the sponsor for the show. They're back. Sports are back, and the sponsor is back, and I'm talking about Bet Online. We got playoffs. You got NBA playoffs. You got NHL playoffs. We just crossed the halfway point for Major League Baseball. And so our partners at Bet Online are your go-to place for all of your betting needs. Take full advantage of the sports bettings back and get on the action with hundreds of odds, futures, and props for you to bet on. And there's always the online casino as well if for some reason you don't want to bet on live sports once again. So you're going to head to betonline.ag. That's betonline.ag and sign up to receive your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's betonline.ag and sign up today. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Thanks to them. Glad they're back. I love using all of their great features, betting on the games. I'm in big hockey right now. Big on hockey, big Colorado Avalanche fan. So we dropped game one, unfortunately. The Stars got game two on Monday. Hopefully bounce back. But I've been betting on hockey games. Like to parlay some of those, or I'll do a hockey and a basketball game parlay. So, yeah, make sure to check out BetOnline. So, all right, Chargers fans, we got you covered next week. We're having a beat writer come on the show. He's been on a couple times. I won't spoil it, but we'll have a beat writer or maybe two come on to detail what's been going on in Chargers camp. Got some guests from UCLA and USC lining up as well for you Trojan and Bruins fans. But for today's episode, like I said, Kirk Morrison joins us to give us some insight inside Rams camp as well as the Rams scrimmage. So without further ado, myself, Frostee Rucker, sit down with Kirk Morrison.
Yeah. So this is Frostee Rucker at LA Football, and my co-host Ryan Dyrud. And we got Kirk Morrison, the hardest working man in broadcasting game. Kirk, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, fellas, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Mr. Show Business himself, covering all here in LA, especially the Rams. We're happy to have him on to give us some insight. Usually Frost and I would be at training camp, but with everything going on with COVID, we didn't make the A list, so Kirk's going to do the dirty work for us. So just, real broad question off the bat, Kirk, what's camp been like since you've been there? Like, what are the differences from years past or similarities? I mean, we see it on Hard Knocks a little bit, but just what's camp been like so far?
So far, man, camp is quiet. And when I say quiet, it's just not a lot of energy, right? You got to, as a player, find some energy, because I'm telling you, watching it as a media member, I can tell you that there is just no fans there. And
right.
It's, fans give you juice, right? Especially on a day in which, it's a little hot out, which everywhere in the country is either always up in the 80s plus 90s some places. And you have a couple fans there, and guys like, you get motivated a lot more. You show out a little bit. But just from being at these training camps so far, it is quiet. Like a lot of guys just really out there practicing against each other. We haven't reached the phase of fighting just yet. I think we're about a couple days away.
It's coming.
It's coming. Where you'll start. And look, trust me, all the media members like, oh my God, they had fights, and I think me and Frostee tell you like it's just part of the game. Like it happens every time, right around, I'll say the third week of training camp. Because look, just as much as we're brothers, like brothers fight, and you're going to see different players fight. And
tired of seeing you.
Yeah. I've seen guys go at it like, fighting, punching each other back and forth, and then later on go have a beer together, right? This is how it is. So I think we're almost to that point of training camp where that happens, but right now it's just very quiet. A lot of teams kind of working on themselves, right? I think the Rams, same thing. They're just working on themselves because, honestly, they know what's coming up September 13th when they play against the Dallas Cowboys, or September 14th, I think, 13th, against the Dallas Cowboys, but at the same time, they're like, nah, you know what? Let's just focus on us. Let's just make sure we got our offense down. We got our defense down. It's those types of schemes and things that I think that right now each team is kind of going through.
Right, because they are playing a game of catch-up, without OTAs, minicamp. They're a lot behind, and they had some questions to be answered with the O-line play of last year, keeping the quarterback upright and letting them get the ball down the field. Is there any camp battles that we should be looking at? Did you sense any people stepping up or anything like that?
Yeah, I did.
Juice, Kirk.
Yeah, the juice. I think the juice is who's going to replace Todd Gurley. I mean, that's the biggest juice. I mean, Todd Gurley was a guy who was a former Offensive Player of the Year in the National Football League, a Pro Bowler, all-pro type of back. Signed a big contract a couple years ago, and he won't be with this team anymore. He's off to the Atlanta Falcons after the Rams released him. And so it's running back by committee, led by Malcolm Brown. He's been there over the last 6 years. He's probably one of the longest tenured Rams on the team. And then behind him was Daryl Henderson, a guy who they drafted last year in the third round. Now he's kind of slowed by a hamstring injury. And then this year they drafted in the second round a guy by the name of Cam Akers. To me, Cam has got a lot of juice. I think he's going to be the guy that I think that they look to kind of be the home run hitter within this offense, kind of similar to what Todd has done in years past. So I think that's a big competition offensively. I think you mentioned the offensive line, Frost. I'm glad you did, because I think they've got some continuity there. They got a guy that you know very well, Big Andrew Whitworth. He's still manning it down at the left tackle, but they've got some guys on the inside they'll bring back. Joseph Noteboom, who got injured, he'll be back. You still got Brian Allen. He's the center. He's still working his way back. He got injured last year, but I really thought that he came along. And then the rest of the offensive line, they were banged up in some places, but those guys come back. And so I think the offensive line will be a lot better. They traded Brandon Cooks last year, wide receiver. And everybody's like, wow, they traded him away. But it was because they've already got Cooper Kupp. They already got your fight-on guy and USC Trojan Robert Woods.
Bobby Trees.
Yeah, but they added a guy named Van Jefferson, the wide receiver out of Florida, who's his dad was a former NFLer. He's been everything that they've asked for and more. So offensively, I think that they're going to be great. The tight end position, they really had a guy named Tyler Higbee. He emerged last year at the end of the year, and he actually, when you compare his numbers to a guy like George Kittle, who's the highest paid tight end in NFL history,
not far.
You'd be hard pressed to look for the last 4 games. I mean, Tyler Higbee had numbers compared to, if not better, than George Kittle. So offensively, that's kind of where the Rams are. You mentioned what's the hot battle. The hot battle for me, Frostee and Ryan, is it has to be the linebacker position, right? They didn't get rid of, but they didn't have the money to pay Corey Littleton, who signed with the Oakland Raiders, is one of their top free agent signings last year. So when you pay that kind of money to an Aaron Donald, to a Jared Goff, Robert Woods, you got some guys making a nice chunk of money. We all know that you got to go more cost efficient, right? My brother always tells me don't use the word cheap. That cheap is just a bad word. Use cost efficient. So the Rams have to be more cost efficient when it comes to their linebacking room. They're going to have a lot of young players, right? They got a guy named Traven Howard. He's out of TCU, second-year college free agent. Their 5th-round draft pick a year ago, Micah Kaiser, he's going to be in the mix. And then they got Troy Reader, who started, I think, 7-8 games last year. So they've got like a group of guys who they're going to kind of throw into platoons and at the inside linebacker position. And they hope that it works. We'll see. But kind of a strong suit with the Rams has been, I think, the back end. right? We know about number 20 on the right side, which is Jalen Ramsey, the best corner, I still think, in the National Football League.
He said it.
There with Stephon Gilmore. So I got to go. Stephon Gilmore was my rook when I was in Buffalo. So those two, Stephon Gilmore and Jalen Ramsey, I think the top two cornerbacks in the league. But it's going to be the guy opposite Jalen Ramsey. It's going to be the Troy Hill kid out of Oregon, kind of waited his turn and finally got his opportunity to play. And then Darius Williams will be another guy that they throw in there as well. They'll be kind of the three, cornerbacks with the safety position, right? Eric Weddle retires, fellas, and then they went out and drafted two safeties. They drafted Terrell Burgess out of Utah, and they drafted Jordan Fuller out of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you, being at practice and watching these two young guys, rookies, the way that they communicate, the way that they fly around to the football, I'm scratching my head saying, wow, wait, you guys got a bargain. You got a guy who they drafted in the 6th round, but he's played some big-time college football.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, he's just stepped in seamlessly. And so I think the back end, I'm a little more optimistic, right? A little more positive than I probably would have been outside of John Johnson, who's a returner, but last year he got injured. I'm a little more positive about that secondary. And then I think the last thing to kind of complete the team – actually, I got two things for you to kind of complete the team. When you think about the defensive line up front, we know about Aaron Donald. They get Michael Brockers back. Remember, he tried to go to Baltimore in free agency. That thing got messed up, and he's back in Baltimore. I mean, he's back in with the Rams, and they signed Leonard Floyd, right, a former first-round pick of the Chicago Bears. He teams back up with Brandon Staley, which he had one of his better years in the NFL. I think a change of scenery from Chicago to L.A. helps him out, and so now you've got him and a kid by the name of Terrell Lewis they drafted in the 3rd round out of Alabama.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, if these guys are getting off the bus to a game, number 52, Terrell Lewis, he needs to be the first one.
Like that.
He's that kind of guy. Right? He's that guy that you just tell him, hey, walk out there with no shirt on. You know, he's 6'4", about 265 pounds, and he's all that. Yeah, he's that. So he's another guy that I think is going to grow into his position with the Rams. And I think the last thing you just talk about the Rams and what they've been doing over the last couple of years. Now, they didn't make the playoffs last year, but the year prior, we know Super Bowl run. Year prior to that, they win their division. A lot of it was on the leg of Greg Zuerlein. The kicker, kicked them into the Super Bowl against the Patriots a couple of years back, kicking a 50-plus yarder to beat the New Orleans Saints. They don't have Greg Zuerlein this year. He left in free agency. And so it's going to be a couple guys. They got a trio of guys that they're kind of, throwing it around to a couple of one rookie, another guy who they signed to bring on, and they got a guy from the CFL. I mean, Hoolaroo. There it is. I got it.
There it is. I butchered it last episode trying to say it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hoolaroo. Yeah. Hoolaroo. But like I said, I had to do it phonetically. So Hoolaroo. I got it.
That's good.
But that's kind of the Rams in a nutshell, man. It really are. It's, Jared Goff still the leader of the team. Two new coordinators, Kevin O'Connell, my former quarterback in college at San Diego State. He takes over the offense to be kind of Sean McVay's voice when Sean McVay's playing head coach. And Brandon Staley, his first time ever calling plays in the National Football League after having worked under Vic Fangio for the last 4 or 5 seasons when they were in Chicago and last year in Denver. So it's a lot of change within the Rams, but yet I still think that this is a team that can make some noise.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks for coming on. No.
That's good. He did the whole show himself. But do you think with the emergence of having this extra time with no OTAs, minicamp, but extra Zoom meetings and going over the board and the X and O's, the guys are getting a real benefit from it, and that's why they're, especially in the back end, more improved?
I think defensively, this is only going to help them out, right? I think defensively for the Rams, they need this time. They need this time of just learning the basics of the defense. Now, I think Frostee, I don't want to downplay a lot of players, but I think defensive coordinators are going to do what? They're going to have to dumb it down a little bit. And when I say dumb it down, meaning that I can't go in with my playbook, fit 400 pages thick. Mm-hmm. I may have to go in with a defensive playbook, maybe about 5 or 6 pages, right? I have 3 or 4 base coverages that that you can play in your sleep, going with about 4 or 5 pressures that everybody can play, and you kind of expand from there. If you try to load guys down too much, and I know I've been in these situations before where we almost had too much defense in, and now guys are thinking, okay, what do we have now? Okay, what are we going to do?
It's a blame game on the players, you know.
Yes. And, they
right?
have the scheme, and I'm like, no, you gave us way too much. Like, not
Right.
you can give, and some players learn differently. But if you give us less, right? That's why I always pride. You played under Pete Carroll, you understand it. But Pete Carroll and those guys in Seattle, they pride themselves on simplicity, meaning that we don't have to do much. We just have to do enough. And sometimes enough gets everybody on the same page, and you play it to the best of your ability. But when you play it over and over again, it's a lot easier. And so I think that's where the Rams defensively, they'll be at. Offensively, it's pretty easy. I mean, they're going into the fourth year already of Sean McVay's offense.
Mm-hmm.
They know the voice. They know the names. I think for a lot of the older veterans, they've been able to have time off during the summer because they understand it. McVay knows what he can get out of those guys. It's just getting these running backs up to speed now because, like you mentioned, he doesn't have a Todd Gurley. But I think Jared Goff, year 4 of this offense, should definitely help out a lot. So it doesn't really affect those guys for the walkthroughs offensively, but defensively, I think that extra time does.
Yeah, absolutely. When you mentioned the defense, and that might actually benefit the Rams because they're such a young team, and so that transition from college to pros is so difficult, but you simplify the playbook, they may be at an advantage, at least heading into the first year under Staley. So, Kirk, I want to quickly touch on, this scrimmage, this beautiful new stadium that everyone, all the media got to see firsthand. Everyone tweeting out these videos of the walkways and the field. So first, before we get to the scrimmage quickly, what was Kroenke's kingdom like in person?
It's different, man. It is. It's for me, it's that I've been to so many stadiums, right? So I understand, and not even gloating about it. Just like, but you go around to these different places, and you're like, wow, this is really nice, right? I got a chance to go to U.S. Bank, Minnesota, when they built their stadium, and I walk around, and you look at the architecture around the infrastructure. Like, man, this is they spent a lot of money here. Then you go to Atlanta and watch their new stadium be built, and you're walking around like, man. And then I've played inside of AT&T Stadium, and AT&T Stadium is one of been a crown jewel, and it's crazy to think that it's been around for 11 years already. So now you have something in Los Angeles, and to drive down, in Inglewood, right? Driving down Prairie, by La Brea, and all these, iconic street names, all the spots. And then, boom, there's this big, giant stadium, right? And it doesn't do it enough justice in terms of when you fly over in the LAX and you see it, you're like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And you drive around it, you just see how big it is. And then you walk inside, and it is still like an open-ended stadium. You can still feel the wind from outside, the weather. It's temperature control, but yet you're indoors, but yet you're outside, which is kind of like what LA is, no matter what you go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You go to these restaurants, places to eat, hang out. You're inside, but yet you have an outdoor feel. And that's what this stadium really is as well.
What a venue to play in. Obviously you get to play in a whole bunch, and, your football career, my football career, I actually played in the first game at that Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. It was the first preseason game. So I got the first game, and just looking around and being in that atmosphere. And, it's going to be different for these guys playing in that beautiful venue with no fans.
Well, I think, Frost, to your point, though, that's the one takeaway from the scrimmage, is that the NFL is going to have to figure out how do they pipe in crowd noise. Okay, I think for the first time,
Seattle
fans – yeah. For the first time, I think fans are going to be appreciated more so than ever when they're able to come back to games, because fans are a lot smarter than people give them, right? And football fans are a lot smarter. It's not, NBA, you cheer for when your guy hits a 3-point shot, you know what I mean? Or you're on a nice little 8-0 run. Baseball, you cheer for a home run, a double play, or a run scored.
Baseball, they cheer for a pop fly too. So
right. But you got to think, in the NFL, I call them the smartest fans in the world, because they know that, okay, it's third down, we got to get loud, right? And they get loud on third down for the defense to create chaos for the offense. They understand when a big play is happening, you can hear the roar of the crowd. Like NFL games, just being there with fans, you understand how important the fans are. Now, going back to the scrimmage, the NFL is kind of tinkering a little bit on how will they inject some of this fan crowd noise, because you don't have that sort of build up on third down like you may have in terms of a silent count for the offense or defense having to use communication hand signals. It was just more of a continuous white noise. Like just and I thought it was something going on with the audio, but no, that was the continuous white noise. And that's where you realize after the scrimmage that even McVay and those guys thought it was irritating because it wasn't really like true crowd noise. It was just this irrepressive, just like white noise, right? And for, you know, guys who got like young kids, and you turn the white noise on, after a while, it just drowns you out, just like fall asleep. So,
yeah, Kirk, so that's weird that they didn't have the normal practice crowd noise that most of us that played are really familiar with, because each team uses it when you got to go on the road. Because that's one of the things you got to do. You got to practice and simulate the crowd noise. And when you go on the road, you got to pack your defense and your special teams because your offense is going to be behind. And we use that crowd noise like it felt like everyone had the same song. Everyone had the same, you know, but now they're not using that. That's weird. Right. So this is the NFL's version of the crowd noise.
Yeah. So the NFL, and they have to figure it out too, fellas, really. And I think, you know, I've seen a couple coaches talk about it already, that it could be a complete disadvantage for some teams if other teams are allowed to have fans, whether it's 15,000, 20,000, or whatever it may be. Some teams are going to be allowed to have fans, and some, because of the county, the state that they're in, are not going to be allowed to have fans. What does that mean? That's an advantage for those teams. And so the NFL has to figure it out. It's either some or it's either none. But you just can't have some teams have that advantage and other teams don't. But it's just interesting to kind of be around that setting the other day, fellas, and honestly realize like how important fans are to a game.
Oh, huge. I mean, I even covering the XFL, which obviously you don't have as many fans as the NFL, but I was at games here in LA, and I think the max we ever hit was like 15,000. It still gets loud. I mean, it's still
loud. Yeah,
a loud, raucous environment where the home team builds off that fan cheering. And if you don't have that, but you go to Dallas and there's 20,000 fans there, yeah, huge disadvantage for the away team.
Kurt, where can people find you out on social media? And part two of the question that I have for you is, are you going to be in studio this year? Or are you going to be doing your pregame from a crowdless parking lot?
Yeah, man, it's a lot. So you can find me on Twitter at Kirk Morrison, Instagram, same at Kirk Morrison. So that's where a lot of my content will be. And then also, too, you can find me on SiriusXM NFL Radio covering the NFL, and 710 ESPN as the Rams radio network. And right now, Frost, I think it's still kind of a process, right? They're going to limit media exposure, right? There is no sideline reporters allowed for the NFL game. So radio, TV, nobody, if you don't play for the team or you are not important on the team, I mean, there's no cheerleaders, no nobody. That sideline, that field is going to be players only. So with that being said, we're kind of toying around with a couple of ideas, doing broadcasts just straight from the booth and, you know, doing a pregame there, the postgame there, or even back in our studio in Los Angeles and downtown. So it's a little bit up in the air. I know for college football, it'll be a lot different, right? You're going to have some crews who are going to be on site. Some crews are going to be doing it from a studio remotely. But that's the life that we live with COVID-19. You hope that things can get back as soon as possible. But I'm just happy to say that we can have football. I mean, if we have football, we'll figure it out. But just to have it back and to be making some of these, you know, stipulations right now, I'm all for it.
That's awesome.
You know, Frost and I have even joked about just setting up a table outside the stadium, just the two of us, cooler full of beers, and just broadcast from there. No one around, just us two with the stadium in the background. So I
think fans really want to do that too. Some fans really just want to go tailgate and be around the atmosphere because that stadium, that stadium is fantastic, man. I can't wait for the fans to see it. You know, we got one more opportunity this week before the Dallas game coming up, but I just think that, man, that stadium is off the chain.
Absolutely. Kirk Morrison, you're the man. We truly appreciate you. Keep up the good work. You do awesome stuff. Been following you for a while, so this has been fun for me. But we'll definitely, hopefully, have you on again soon, and you can keep giving us all of the updates that you get. So appreciate it, Kirk.
Frosty, Ryan, appreciate it, man. Anytime, fellas, let me know. Appreciate it.
52, my guy. It's always good to get a guy like Kirk Morrison on with us. Not only did he play football at a high level, he also has been in the broadcast game for a long time. He's a real football insider. He's on multiple channels, and, you know, he just brings a lot of value to what we do, Ryan.
Yeah, awesome guy. He does a little bit of everything. He's a jack of all trades. Not saying he's not a master of none because he's good at what he does, but yeah, fun to have his insight as he's there because we are unfortunately unable to be. So hopefully Rams fans got something out of that. And he'll be, like we said, again at the next scrimmage. So we'll try to get him back or someone else that's there so we can give you more in-depth look at what actual, the players' performance were. I think this first dry run through was kind of more sloppy, and there was some good stuff that came out of it. But I think the second go around will be a lot more insightful for us. So we'll have either him or someone else back on to break that down.
Absolutely, and that's always how you recap the first scrimmage anyway. It's going to be a little bit sloppier. Guys are getting fine-tuned. They've been out of football for months. So next time we check in, I'm sure there'll be a better report. And again, I'm hyped to see the stadium just like Kirk was. And what an awesome guest for us to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, man, that stadium looks – every time I see pictures and videos, it looks fake. It does not look real. So it's going to be cool. But Frostee, where can everyone find you at?
Well, you can email me at frosteepodcast@yahoo.com or find me on social media at TheOrganicFrost.
There you go. You can find me at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB on the socials. Email me at podcast@LAFBnetwork.com. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We are everywhere you listen. And also go ahead and find us on YouTube. As now we got the YouTube channel, got the video up there. We do it on Facebook and Instagram as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great week. We'll check in soon. This is the LA Football Podcast.